has a three-act structure, beginning, middle and end. Birth, life and death. Begin, fall, rise. I'm not the only one who remembers when this picture was everywhere, right? Speaking of looking back, that battle has had quite a few sagas over the years. The Goku vs Superman trilogy, the Deadpool trilogy, the Thor trilogy, the Batman quadrilogy. With each chapter embodying a specific era of that battle, I think it's pretty cool to have these pseudo story arcs for the characters that this silly versus show decided to represent more than once. But what about those that got on the show only twice and may or may not need of a matchup that properly captures their character? Wrapping up an hypothetical trilogy of sorts in the best way? That's what this wheel is for, baby! So, inspired by Guidante's wonderfully unique idea, and as a token of gratitude in general for the amazing support he has been giving to both my versus and non-versus content, let's go over each combatant who got on the show twice and which matchup I would give them to wrap up the Death Battle trilogy. Disclaimer, you're gonna see a lot of familiar faces in here, and you will probably be able to tell by my tone if I think the character needs to be on the show a third time or not, but hey, what can you do? Like and subscribe for more, and time to spin that bitch! Why am I so aggressive? Akuma Matata. After delivering and receiving fatalities for and from Mortal Kombat's two final bosses, the one I deem to be Akuma's next best opponent is somewhat of a demon himself, an ogre if you will, Yujiro Hanma from Baki. Both are martial artists looking for strong opponents, valuing strength above all else. Being feared and revered for their own strength, work as a rival and dark foil to the main protag, whom they killed a parental figure of. They both associate with ogres and demons, with Yujiro being nicknamed the Ogre and Akuma's Japanese name translating into Great Ogre / Demon. They're interchangeable in Japanese mythology apparently. They strangely have religiously contrasting symbols on their back, with Akuma having the kanji for the word heaven, while Yujiro has a demon face, and yes, they do look similar in the most common designs. But for this battle I want them to use Street Fighter 6 Akuma because come on, don't tell me that gray in mane isn't the most majestic thing ever. You can have Akuma say Yujiro reminds him of his younger self or something. Devil Artemis even still would love to animate both characters, so that's great. Now, the two elephants in the room. Yes, there is a slight but notable tonal clash between Street Fighter and Baki as franchises, and yes, Akuma and Yujiro as villains. Not only Akuma kills people off screen and he will leave you alone if he doesn't see you as a strong opponent worth fighting, in a very Predator Code of Honor type of way, but Yujiro is a literal rapist, like both literally and figuratively to pretty much anyone he crosses paths with. Which brings me to the sweet downright delicious next part of this matchup, Akuma Gigastorms. Like, sure, there's still the inherently cool martial arts choreography potential, and you can still have Yujiro pull some in-character bullshit like kicking away Akuma's Hadokens or something because he learned from Tibetan monks or some shit, but the sheer idea of Yujiro starting off overjoyed at meeting someone so strong, only to devolve into mindless anger once he sees how little effect his fists have on the Dark Hado user, who isn't intimidated in the slightest by the ogre, all while to discuss what the idea of strength really means, and we get some downright demonic imagery for both. Like guys, this could, if Shiga Ito was Homelander Anime Hands edition, then this is Homelander Hand to Hand edition. Every single ounce of Black Force energy Yujiro claims or thinks to have, Akuma straight up invented it, and it would be so immensely satisfying to see him fall to the Raging Demon, as Akuma resumes meditating like nothing happened when the fight ends. Because as far as power goes, let's be real, this would be the greatest fight of Yujiro's life, but for Akuma, it would just be a Tuesday. After finding the two smartest and richest human beings in DC Comics, I actually think Tony's next matchup could bring something new to the show entirely. Kamen Rider build. Yeah, between this and Ichigo, apparently there's a Kamen Rider for every superhero, since there's a legacy title sorts apparently. I don't know, many recommended me to check out Kamen Rider, and I loved Power Rangers when I was a kid, so if any of you want to give me tips on where to start an hypothetical Kamen Rider journey, I'd be glad. Speaking of finally starting things, let's get into the damn sweet connections. They're both snarky inventors with inflated ego, not helped by being some of the smartest in the franchises. They both went through a traumatic incident that damaged part of them, leading to them finding out they created technology that helped powerful armies in harming innocent people, and said guilt motivated them to become superheroes. They also both create multiple armors, each with their own unique power set, including one for their best friend plus an ultimate armor that stands above the rest. Both fight shady government organizations, both fought in civil wars, and both assemble teams of similarly extraordinary heroes fighting as one to save the world. Apparently the winner is surprisingly debatable, which is both fun in general and a major good news when the matchup includes a mainline comic book character, but even as someone with no idea who this guy is, it really sounds like someone who's built of a feather with Tony, in a matchup that really taps into his character beyond, smart, reach and make special suits, unlike his previous 2 episodes kinda did. How about that? After clashing blades with a fellow living weapon anti-hero and then a cybernetic video game ninja, we'll keep things in the gaming world because I think Raiden's next best opponent is A2 from Nier Automata. They're both white-haired, sword-wielding androids in silver/black with a red super form, a katana inherited from an enemy, and a bad history with betrayal. They also both aren't robots, clash swords with colossally bigger enemies, and both originate from hack-and-slash games that aren't afraid to delve into the conundrums of politics and philosophy respectively. I know, 2B exists and she's the more iconic / popular / more likely, but A2 is where it's at when it comes to character similarities. Not gonna lie, this idea is hard carried by the franchise combination, music potential, and me tearing up after finishing Nier Automata with a friend not too long ago. I don't necessarily think it brings anything new to Raiden's character that the show hasn't demonstrated already, even as someone not terribly familiar with Gear Solid, and even loses this one apparently due to having every disadvantage except experiences, so yeah. Doctor, activate my losing streak. After fighting a fellow robot boy, then clashing with his fellow Megaman, I don't know anything about Megaman nor ever watched his Dead Battle episodes. But I did see a familiar face in his matchup spread, and I'm sorry, in the name of my childhood, I just couldn't ignore this one. Barry Stickrise from Jetpack Joyride. You know that tune started in your head as soon as you saw this handsome mug. Anyway, connections. They have a blue color scheme, they carry a weapon that shoots bullets, they have a robot dog whose name means speed, they both fight evil scientists, and yeah, it's a gigastorm so for Eggman in every way. But I just couldn't contain myself from highlighting the sheer nostalgia that Jetpack Joyride brings. I know Megaman is colossally more nostalgic for many, if you wanna stretch his near non-existent list of connections. But yeah, there you go, there's some decent animation potential, I guess. After clashing chains with a fellow indestructible biker and trying to drag a certain Hellspawn back to hell with him, in what I previously called the perfect duology of Ghost Rider clashing against the two very different embodiments of the 90s, what I deem to be Johnny and Zeto's next best matchup is a bit of a wild card, in every definition. It's Joker from Persona. Black-clad heroes that made a deal with the devil and are known to make people atone for their sins by changing their hearts or burning their souls with iconic blue flames to match. Both dabble into alternate dimensions, both have been on the wrong side of the law multiple times, they clashed against gods, carry a chain motif, and both have an outfit change when switching into their different personas. For bonus points, one of Joker's own personas, the Hellbiker, looks eerily similar to Ghost Wars himself. And they also have the added connection of starring into sprite episodes I really liked right after 3D animated death fights that kinda left a sour taste in my mouth. The animation could go into a lot of different places, like mixing comic book visuals with a Persona 5 flair, Kratos bulldozing his way to Joker's personas, the Phantom Thieves fighting against other Ghost Riders in the background, as the fight takes place in a mix of Mementos and Hell, and obviously the climax having Kratos clashing against Satanael, with the latter actually taking part of the fight instead of being used as a super move, which in turn would funnily enough parallel Kratos' portrayal in Spawn Rider compared to Lobo Rider. Interactions wise, you could have a Rider commenting on the various hellish personas Joker is summoning, have a banter that's sort of like, "You pay for your sins. No, you pay for your sins." Both of them annoying each other via either summoning more and more monsters or just regenerating from everything, Joker shitting his pants at Kratos' sheer power once he finds him inside Johnny's heart. The debate is honestly surprisingly close. Johnny will once again be faced with someone with very difficult Axis style to get around. Meanwhile, the sheer Marvel Herald bullshit that Kratos brings would undeniably send the Joker for a loop. And you cannot tell me that mixing up Persona jazzy vocals with biker gang heavy metal wouldn't be the coolest thing ever. Yeah, it's probably a Joker L, and Ghost Rider definitely doesn't need a turtle matchup per se, especially with this more so being a bonus chapter to what I would call the Ghost Rider vs 90s duology, and this doesn't really bring anything too new besides the Phantom Thieves and Ghost Riders clashing in the background, but I still think it's a good matchup for both, and definitely one you never saw coming. After clashing with Blanca in a shocking street fight, and with him and Ash being set to fight against a fellow monster summoning champion, I think Pikachu's next best matchup idea is a Pikachu Battle Royale. Yeah, this idea was suggested by Cap Series a while back, and not gonna lie, it does sound pretty fun. I think it's movie Pikachu against anime Pikachu against game Pikachu, and there's a wrestling one too and such. Not much else to say, but it would be really adorable. After setting the scene ablaze in the Pokemon Battle Royale and clashing against a fellow fire-themed Pocket Monster, what I think would be a great wrap-up opponent for everyone's favorite not dragon from Pokemon is Rathalos from Monster Hunter, which would also debut a new series on that battle. I am somehow less familiar with Monster Hunter than I am with Pokemon, so here's what I gathered to my research. They're both ridiculously popular fire-breathing dragons that apparently aren't dragons, iconic for the first generation of their respective series, and share mascot status alongside a cute animal creature. Also, they're both in Smash Bros, so here you have compatible 3D models ready to use. Simple connections, but hey, it works. I've seen it being described as basically Hulk vs Godzilla Orange Dragon Edition, which sure, sounds fun. It's a classic David vs Goliath, where apparently the former, aka Charizard, wins, so there's that too. Apparently this matchup works best if it's only their respective base forms, which further strengthens my belief that Charizard's Last Death Battle episode being one dedicated to him and him alone, as far as the Pokemon side of things goes, would be really sweet. Not much else to say, I have another Dragon vs Dragon matchup in my personal wishlist already, but this is fire, man. This is lit. Please subscribe. After landing quite the home run on the other 2020 Evil Superman and leaving another warrior father in a solid state, with explanations on why that happened not quite deemed solid by many, I think the next opponent for Omni-Man is World Squads / Pink Diamond from Steven Universe. Millennia-old alien conquerors that fell in love with a human being, having a son that later became a hero of two worlds, whom I also paired with one another in a possible Invisible episode, taking on a secret identity of a heroic figure to hide their more imperialistic selves, only for that shady past to be revealed to their sons and the world at large, in a way that really shakes the characters and narrative. but they ultimately did both rebel against their empire. What I think makes this a particularly great choice for a third and final Omni-Man Death Battle episode is the fact that Omniland was all about his pre-redemption Season 1 self. Omni Bardock was all about Nolan and his Season 2 redemption, and with what I guess would be called Omni Quartz, we can probably get into his fully post-redemption self of Season 3 to 4, with the analysis finally getting into the conclusion of his character instead of chickening out of it like they did with Omni Bardock. Speaking of that one, yeah, the connections may be similar, but trust me, as far as debate and animation goes, it's a whole other story. For starters, even as they stick to their guns and remain consistent with the infamous star level sun disk, Rose will still be massively stronger and more powerful, since Steven was a star they capture at solar system level thanks to the corrupting light thingy. Speed is in a similar conversation, since while Viltrumites can cross galaxies in a day, Gens can move and react to warps across galaxies in seconds. That's the difference between billions of times faster than light and trillions times. So right off the bat, Nolan lacks the two biggest advantages that normally carry him throughout the vast majority of his fights. In fact, in many ways, Rose is to Omni-Man what Omni-Man usually is to his enemies, which is honestly just deliciously poetic. Gems are even less organic than Viltrumites, lacking the need for sustenance entirely, probably living for far longer and being literally unable to get tired. Rose can also create shields and constructs to scale to her attack potency, putting Nolan at an area of effect disadvantage, and that's without getting to his basic brute strength against the various powers like shattering his equilibrium with a super shout, stabbing him with a sword, or just letting him splatter against her. On Nolan's side of things, gems are vulnerable to piercing attacks, so maybe a precise karate chops could proof her, leaving a gem vulnerable to being shattered. But that's like 1 win coin against 4. They could have Rose shapeshift into the kaiju Steven Turin toward the end of Steven Universe Future, referencing the Hail Mary that gave even Nolan a run for his money. Hell, if Rose kills Omni-Man, I can totally see her crying over his body, resurrecting him into an even more immortal and pinker state than before. But despite what I said about this episode taking place during Nolan's post-redemption self in the animated series, the setup would still need to be his older self trying to conquer Earth, only for Rose/Pink Diamond to protect it like she did against the Diamond Authority. And you couldn't really have them talk about their sons because Rose kinda cannot exist at the same time as Steven, so maybe they could have Nolan once again offhandedly mention to have a son and he must never know about his true self, prompting Rose to call him out like, you would do such a thing to your own son? Which yes, would be hypocritical because yes, they're both flawed characters. Every Rose may have his thorns, but I generally think this matchup would be a diamond in the rough. After clashing with two video game final bosses in episodes I wanna say represent polar opposite sides of the Death Battle quality spectrum, and with me generally thinking Bowser doesn't really need another episode, I think Lord Hater from Wonder Over Yonder could work. They're both tyrannical, heel-tempered space conquerors with galactic ambitions and comically trivial pursuits of love for a woman, with lots of adorable minions on their beck and call. Even their own designs kinda fall into what I would like to call edge horrible. It's clearly meant to be intimidating, but you can still use this design to sell McDonald's toys with no problem, you know? And for all their power, armies and mighty artifacts, of which I've seen amazing fanarts of, they still end up being defeated by adorably optimistic adventurers that wear their art on their sleeves as Nazi hat on their heads. Unlike the jock-geek contrast of Bowser vs Eggman, I wanna say this matchup clashes Bowser against a much more similar character, birds of a tyrannical feather if you will. The army fight potential is still present however. Wonder Over Yonder is a fun and colorful series I definitely wouldn't mind seeing more of, either on Death Battle or in general, and I saw some say that this matchup reduces Bowser to a joke, but not really. Not only Gigastorms here, but I feel like his relatively more serious and animalistic villainy could clash clash really well against childishness in fun ways. Fun and cute is how I describe this matchup as a whole. After clashing chains with a fellow god killer, then Penance squaring up against a fellow deal with a devil victim, not gonna lie, I am not saying Spawn needs a third one back of his character to get rightfully represented, but there is another semi-popular Spawn matchup they might do. Demi-Fiend from Shin Megami Tensei. Ordinary people until a tragic death was bestowed upon them, leading to them being bonded to and by demonic and parasitic forces, transforming them into demonic individuals like the entities they usually encounter, beating and overthrowing the individuals that transformed them, then gaining the title King. They took part in a war between heaven and hell, plus an event that recreated the world, briefly living as normal people, and despite their intimidating presence, there lies a guilt-ridden soul who thinks they deserve such hell to live through. I've seen people say that the cosmology gap on Shin Megami Tensei is somehow even crazier than Ghost Rider, not that it particularly helped Johnny or Zertos much, but I've also seen people say that Spawn should take this one too, so hey, who knows. Apparently Joker's almighty attacks, the reality warping bypassing ones, make a comeback into the conversation here, which would somehow tax even an Axie King like Spawn. Also, apparently Shin Megami Tensei has this weird thing where we never actually see non-fodder demons fight one-on-one with each other, as bigger fights almost always involve depowering or sealing, so it's a very interesting debate that I'm sure can bring some crazy visuals and awesome interactions. Since Demi-Fiend sounds like an even more birds of a feather with Mr. Simmons than Johnny was. So yeah, not necessarily, but it would be really cool. After fighting a fellow energy absorbing chick who actually doesn't absorb anything apparently and a fellow former Captain Marvel, I guess Carol could fight, I don't fucking know, Al Jordan Green Lantern, because they're both comic book military pilots that became members of a space police force, taking on a legacy title, and they wield the energy powers, and they both attempted to kill a child the last time they were on the show, so yeah. After fittingly enough taking the double L in his 2 attempts to kill Robert Downey Jr., the opponent I have in mind to end Lex Death Battle trilogy is technically still in the realm of comics, but not originating from them. Also technically someone who's also been on the show twice, but not this version in particular. I am indeed referring to Archie Comics Eggman. Bold comic book supervillains, known for their intelligence and inventions, antagonizing a swift hero in blue, operating mech suits empowered by an otherworldly power, leading a company with a name on it, and being just the most wickedly evil versions of these characters bar none. Eisenberg likes gets close, really close, but I have yet to see him healed and re-handicap his already handicapped sister just to prove a point. But if you have a strong stomach and you wanna look up why I think Comic Book Lex and Archie Eggman are around the same ballpark of evil, look up Lex Luthor Triumphant. Thank wow that whole thing isn't canon. Regarding who I think wins, gravity guns, invisibility belts, phantom zone projectors, super level clones or power-ups, mother box stuff, I do think Eggman kinda risks to end up boiled and fried, but honestly, if you know anything about Archie Robotnik, I highly doubt any tears will be shed. On his side of things, however, robotization can make technology self-destruct, which would highly damage a lot of Luthor's tools. Same goes for Eggman pulling a shockwave and rewrite Lex's entire childhood with a Genesis wave. Or maybe he could imprison Lex inside a fridge, build a robotic replica of him, then force him to watch said replica be showered with love and appreciation by Metropolis that he never managed to organically get as he starves to death. If you know what this is referencing, you know what this is referencing. Honestly, this Eggman is such a complete monster that I would not mind Lex flipping Luthor to win. Imagine him having his own version of the playing human speech as he smacks Eggman around with the Everyman project and finally gets a single W in the entire his entire Death Battle history. First of all, I am Vegeta. After fighting a fellow edgy rival with a super form and then a fellow Prince of Pride, I honestly don't have a shadow of interest when it comes to Vegeta returning. But if we really wanna do it, I don't fucking know. Virgil from Devil May Cry? They both start with a V, they're colder and bluer than their warmly colder rival, not to mention more narcissistic and prideful. They're both sons of impressive heritage of warriors, they both have stronger transformations, they both fall in love with a human woman, resulting in a hybrid hero, and they both died and came back multiple times. Yeah, it's dog shit, and I don't even know if Vegeta wins this one, maybe, I guess, I don't know. I've heard this canonical winning streak on Dragon Ball is a little 50-50, so I guess Vegeta fans could use a bone or two. Not even the flying brick martial artist versus swordsman's dynamic works in the slightest. Yeah, I'm honestly okay with Veggie's tale ending against Thor, honestly. But this is literally the only other matchup he has that makes me say, oh, okay, instead of, huh. After clashing swords with a fellow nightmarish one-man army, then another with a similarly desperate need for therapy, there is one more Guts matchup that I think Dead Battle can do to end Guts' representation on the show with a bang. And that's the one matchup many still insist should have happened instead of Dimitri. Claire from Claymore. There is some of that good Gutsy 3 DNA in there, you know, dark fantasy, medieval background, childhood trauma, revenge quest, mellowing out as the story goes and such. But Claire and Guts share so much more of the same story beats, it's kinda crazy. Both of them are demon-slaying swordsmen with comically large swords, proficient in killing monsters seemingly way above their league, hiding a deeply emotionally vulnerable heart underneath a brooding facade, having a brief period of happiness while being seen as renowned warriors, in which they form an utmost crucial connection with a loved one, before tragedy forcefully dragged them back into vengeance as the main villain turned into a mass murdering winged demon, while their aforementioned loved ones remains a fundamental part of the healing and growth. They also learn to value companionship over needlessly throwing your life away for vengeance, as they often risk doing when they enter the super forms, which funny enough happen to have a contrasting demonic black vs angelic white motif going on, so that's some makes for some cool visuals. Okay, first off, 11 out of 10 connections. This is some Obito vs Darth Vader levels of great connections. Apparently Claire is a part monster, so you know, Guts' brain to sacrifice reacts to supernatural beings, so the setup kinda writes itself. Animation wise, as a sword fight, pretty straightforward, but the dynamic of Guts' overwhelming strength and aggression clashing against Claire's agility and speed could make for some great damage animation. The core potential is pretty out there too, thanks to their region. And obviously they can both unleash their final forms at the end. Maybe pepper in some Leon vs Frank energy, you know, have them be surrounded by monsters during the fight, since fighting monsters is something they do every single day, you know. And with Claire's final form being much more mentally stable than Guts' berserk state, they can probably tap into some Magneto vs Tetsuo energy, they're giving him a dignified and respectful death in contrast to the raging monster he became. Tragic? Yes. Apparently 100% on brand for both franchises and characters? Also yes. Apparently power-wise is pretty close, which is fun since you would need to look into specific factors, like Claire having many ways to make up for a lack of versatility compared to Guts with effects like Quicksword. But what fully sold me about this being Guts' potential last Death Battle episode is how you can tap into his up-to-date characterization in the current story, both in the breakdown and animation, as he's fighting someone with a much more subdued and calm personality, chasing after the same peace and relief he is. This in turn makes the crescendo of brutality towards the end feel even more impactful, you know? Overall, yeah, I think I'm gonna say this for a few matchups in this video, but I do think this is not only the best for both, but potentially the best matchup to represent Guts' entire character period. Gutsmare tapped into the, you know, killing monsters everyday thing, and Guts C3 did go for a slightly more introspective take on both traumatized anti-heroes, but this one can capture both aspects and beyond. Why the fuck was it so big? After street fighting a fellow video game icon and taking a slightly more demonic one in Deadly Brawl, I actually believe Ryu's next opponent lies outside the gaming realm entirely. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star. Both a famous, selfless, world-traveling martial artist raised by a wise old mentor whose name ends with Uken, who taught them an ancient fighting style specifically designed to kill, whose name contains the word fist, funnily enough, and on top of physical techniques they also picked up some chi stuff too, which definitely came in handy when hunting down the man that killed their master's family with the same fighting style they were taught. Lastly, they both achieved an ultimate state of being sent around the theme of nothingness. It's a matchup that kinda speaks for itself, but I really vibe with it. Imagine Samurai Jack vs Afro Samurai, except it's straight hands. They'll probably need to hire an animator exception at hand-to-hand combat for this one to work, and I would 100% want them to use the Street Fighter 6 model for you, since you know, it signals his evolution and everything, and I do think it's neat for him to hypothetically end his Death Battle run by fighting someone that matches him in so many ways, down to the nostalgia factor too, especially when the sheer teams of his previous two opponents weren't exactly the strongest. Would you call this a good matchup for both? Sure you can. After clashing with a fellow iconic movie kaiju and being set to fight another radioactive tragic monster, whom I still know info about which version of Goji they'll go for by the time we're recording this, but I'd wager there's gonna be a lot of Monsterverse influence. My pick for a third hypothetical Godzilla episode taps into the more eldritch aspects of the character. Ladies and gentlemen, Cthulhu. They're both ancient, usually green-colored, godlike horrors from the depths of the sea, representing mankind's biggest fears. They're downright iconic, inspiring countless stories, inspirations and parodies within or outside the mediums. Their designs are as a mix and mash of various animals from both horror world or mythology, while still retaining that aquatic aesthetic. Both known for taking long slumbers in the Pacific Ocean, and despite the original stories ending with them supposedly being vanquished by men, time and time again we're reminded that they'll always emerge and will never be truly ready. Yeah man, major legacy matchup, extremely easy to sell to mainstream audiences, and honestly I don't think the Lovecraft cosmology's colossal size detracts from anything for this matchup. I mean, Ghost Rider vs Spawn showed us you can still have an amazing episode even with a notable cosmology gap. With recent Godzilla iterations downright going full Lovecraft in certain aspects, like Ultima being an interdimensional entity, Monster vs Godzilla having a full temple built to his name at the bottom of the ocean, or Godzilla Earth aiming to terraform the planet, I honestly think these matchup connections only got stronger with time, sprinkling some kaiju goodness mixed with the good old cosmic horror, and I do think you can craft something special out of this. After his 8-bit beatdown against a fellow chain-wielding god killer and a fight against another goddamn pissed godly father, in an episode that accomplished the impossible and made me dislike a matchup I previously adored, I ultimately caved into liking Quake's other popular video game matchup, that would be Dante from Devil May Cry. Iconic protags from hack and slash PlayStation games, half-breeds of a mortal woman and a godlike being, it's kinda crazy how rarely the opposite happens, and who both went on similar levels of character development, growing into older, wiser and overall more heroic versions of themselves, which also happen to be the versions I'd want to see being used for this matchup. I think we've had enough Greek Kratos, you know? Yes, you may remember I'm not the biggest fan of popularity over connections matchups, the same genre as Mario vs Sonic or Bowser vs Eggman, but the latter did result in an amazing episode, so hey, at this point, why not honestly. Dante just got a Netflix series and I doubt Kratos will fade into obscurity anytime soon, so I'd wager there will be a pretty damn good view count overall. They both have a fuck ton of weapons and artifacts to rely on, a super mode from the non-human side of their families they can tap into, and they can both be scaled at low multiversal with immeasurable speeds apparently, which translated means that whoever wins is gonna have to work hard for it. The banter kinda speaks for itself, you know, serious versus comical, serious guy versus comical guy, those are fun. Those can be fun. I wanna say the animation potential is notably better here compared to Crosshair, going from short to long range, devastating their surroundings, impaling each other multiple times like it's nothing, and such and such and such. Like, it's an okay matchup overall. Ending Kratos' run on the show by clashing against a fellow PlayStation 2 debuting icon feels poetic enough, and not saying I'm rooting for Dante after the disappointment of Lord Kratos being validated in his previous episode, but I'm also not saying that I would shed many tears if the God of Lore were to meet his end here. After forcing his way against a fellow suited up tyrant, then clashing egos with another genius who's green with envy, I actually think Doom's next best opponent brings us outside the western side of things entirely. That would be Gilgamesh from Fate. They're both rulers of a small but capable nation whose immense arrogance is only matched by their ridiculously overpowered power. Both were motivated by the loss of a loved one, both served as villains and or heroes depending on their canon, and they're both driven by their own weird sense of morality. Also, the biggest losses are almost always due to ego, rather than being overpowered in the traditional sense. That works as a brilliant segue into the fact that I am kinda tired of Dr. Doom's status as an unbeatable, self-gratifying god in the power scaling community, and I would really love to see him get humbled in at least one of his matchups. And luckily for this slightly spiteful side of little old me, Fate cosmology is one of the very few things able to rival Marvel's as far as the pure unadulterated bullshit goes. Rival Marvel rivals. I swear that wasn't on purpose. Subscribe anyway please. Anyway, very interestingly, both of these rulers share a lot of XC powers that would normally spell an immediate win in most of their fights. I'm talking about stuff like fate manipulation, soul manipulation, mind manipulation, reality warping, dimensional travel, and both can bypass resistances. Doom does have slightly better X, since Marvel magic is basically plot manipulation, but Gilgi over here works on some dark side timing apparently, because his true form is placed in another realm entirely, the Throne of Heroes. Then again, they can both open portals to other dimensions, so yeah. At least I would want this to be an absolute nail-biter for Victor. Like, I'm talking on some wins but on extreme difficulty type of stuff. I've also seen Vecna as a popular opponent for Doom lately, and I'm not caught up in Dungeons & Dragons lore, so maybe that matchup is a better version of this one for all I know, in that case greater, then replace Vecna with this one. But for now, I suggest ending Dr. Doom's run on that battle with someone who at least can get close to the Latvian ruler as far as overwhelming powers, ego and axis stuff. Since you know, everyone else so far has been beneath him. After battling with a fellow princess kidnapper from Nintendo and squealing like a pig against a superior master of dark magic, my pick for the next Ganondorf matchup is Sauron from Lord of the Rings. They're both Dark Lords who work as successors to the main big bad of the respective franchise, starting off as higher beings before becoming a more earthly problem, residing in a dry landscape you can't just set foot into, being known for their manipulative schemes to obtain golden artifacts that grant them control over all life, fought against alliances of multiple races, and got defeated by a small hero in green that they terribly underestimated. But not even being reduced to shadows of their former selves stopped them from coming back again and again. This is a very interesting matchup for me. Their many magical powers make for an inherently creative animation potential, as their respective episodes went to show. It taps into them being not only war machines but masters of deception. 2. As they can try to make one join the other during the fight, who can have a nice shape-shifting showdown, an army fight in the background, devastating the environment with their own brands of reality warping, have Ganon take over the moon to make it red and summon even more minions. Like, the more I read about this matchup, the more it feels like it can outdo the already peak Sauron vs Lich King. It's just that Ganon sounds like a much more closer match to Sauron compared to Arthas, as far as a character I mean. In the same way Darth Vader vs Obito is the same difference between Darth Vader vs Obito versus Darth Vader, or Darth Vader vs Doctor Doom, and Darth Vader vs Doom, and Darth Vader vs Doctor Doom. Which is really funny given who I consider to be Lich King's own best matchup, but I don't know if I already talked about it on the wheel or not. Apparently Ganon has been used in a very surface level so far on the show, so this would be a highly welcome change. And everything about the Sauron half of Sauron vs Lich King was pretty damn peak, but it didn't get fully into his manipulative sides apparently. So here's the chance. Apparently they can both scale anywhere between island to fucking star level with high ends, no idea how that works, but Ganon does have more solid faster than life stuff. The powers is where the actual conversation is at however. They both have solid mind control with resistances, regen, immortality, reality warping, soul manipulation resistances, but apparently there is one big precedent for Ganon being able to destroy the One Ring since he destroyed something similar called Malice apparently. I don't know Zelda lore, so I'm just going off what I'm reading here. But depending on how you wanna give what you wanna give to whose lore, it could go either way with a slight edge to Ganon. And yeah, pretty easily Ganon's best matchup bar none from both a debate standpoint and a character franchise combination standpoint. So whoever came up with this idea, I see you, my boy, I see you. Or maybe girl, I don't know. Tommy Oliver, the Green Ranger. After nothing short of 2 mecha battles against the Gundam and Mechagodzilla respectively, I think a good third matchup for the Mighty Morphin Green/White Ranger would be Lloyd Garmadon, the Green Ninja from Ninjago, which, the more I think about it, the more the latter feels like Lego Power Rangers, you know? I mean, a wise old mentor, multicolored team of boys, they fight against ancient fantasy villains, lots of sci-fi mixed there too. Speaking of connections, teenage evils part of superhero teams who started off as their enemies due to the actions of a main villain, taking a special queen title once things get cleared up, having many costumes throughout the run, both possessing a dragon mech, both went to from low rank in their teams to straight up leader status, replacing the red member, and both got a controversial revamp in 2017. Yeah, I have no idea how to integrate LEGO stuff into animation. Maybe they could use a LEGO Green Ranger figure, because I'm pretty sure humanized Lloyd is achievable, but you just feel weird, you know? But the animation potential for both one-on-one or big draconic fights is very much there, and the connections are pretty damn decent. Not much else to say besides that the element of this fight is green. After being terribly mischaracterized in his fight against a fellow Master of the Elements, and being set to fight another one who matches him a lot more closely in terms of world travels and sleeping through disasters, apparently I am looking forward to Aang vs Traveler much more than the average person in that battle community. Up next for the last airbender we have Po from Kung Fu Panda. Not gonna lie, there was a time where I found this one slightly overrated, but then I got into reading the connections and I now totally understand why so many wanted this instead of Ether. Like, it's a godlike franchise and character combination. They're both staff-wielding martial artists from China-inspired Western animation, born to defend the mortal and spiritual world alongside their friends, and with a traumatic backstory of barely escaping the clutches of a genocidal warlord, who nearly drove the spiritually peaceful kind to near extinction due to fear prophecy. This resulted in a lot of inner conflict and turmoil hidden by a mask of childlike goofiness that wouldn't heal properly until they fully reached inner peace. If you go deep into the rabbit hole of this matchup, you can find entire columns of text about how many shared themes and plot points there are between book 1 to 3 of Avatar and movie 1 to 3 of Kung Fu Panda. It's kinda insane. Also, they both have, let's say, highly controversial successors that carry the mantle after the initial trilogy. Enough connections now, what does this bring? Well, for starters, I can 100% see them kicking out at each other from being the Dragon Warrior and Avatar respectively, unless you wanna go for Aang and mistaking Poe for a spirit, which would make 100% sense, is met far weirder talking animals. The fight can be a fun and enthusiastic blend of the speed-centered martial arts, Poe's key energy matching Aang's elements, the second half of the fight is shifting to either the speed world or speed realm, then keeping it lighthearted and fun the whole time, Avatar State Aang vs Chi Master Poe. The ending is inevitably gonna be sad regardless of who wins unfortunately, but it is a very debatable matchup once you get to the meat of this matchup, which, not gonna lie, I kinda mad that they didn't do sooner. Something that, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kinda mad they didn't do it sooner. Like, this matchup is as best for both as you can possibly get. I still don't wanna validate Debbie Downers that got a little overboard when it came to wanting this instead of Travel Aang when it was announced, but still, I really hope this happens before the show ends, man. What else can I say except everything changed when this matchup skadooshed its way into my heart. Venom! I got adrenaline momentum! After clashing with a fellow comic book villain in a Tom Hard to see through fight, then a fellow black symbiote user in an obviously better episode that still kinda makes him Carnage characterization wise, I think we can all agree that Eddie and his goopy friend deserve a matchup that finally taps into their monstrous anti-hero self. And I found one, but it's a bit surprising, so bear with me. Kevin 11 from Ben 10. They both started out as monstrous and vengeful supervillains before evolving into anti-hero allies of the same creepy superheroes they previously antagonized. Both had a rough childhood with a strained relationship with their fathers, and both were granted alien alterations that increased their physical prowess, plus granted them shape-shifting and regen abilities. As villains, they work as a dark reflection of the heroic protag, initially loathing and obsessing over eventually destroying them after gaining the aforementioned Dark Reflection status from the hero's own powers. Over time they redeem themselves, but not without the occasional lapse back into villainy every now and then. Not that it stops them from fighting a powerful and tyrannical member of their own species, absorbing their power. Onto the fight itself, insert obligatory Kevin Scar not lasting long gag here. Have the fight start by both mistaking each other for dangerous criminal aliens, with neither technically being wrong on that front, their own type of shape-shifting being roughly comparable, the snarky potential is on par with Maito vs Shigaraki if not more, and you cannot tell me that the idea of Kevin absorbing / replicating symbiote powers, especially if it's King of Black in Black Venom, wouldn't go hard as hell. Granted, he can tap into his monstrous transformations without outside help, so he probably loses, but this matchup works really well, man. And just imagine how much the algorithm is gonna love at that battle that has Ben 10 vs Spider-Man in the title. With recent Venom adaptations like the Insomniac game kinda abandoning the entire second half of the Lethal Protector title, giving us a more Hulk-esque figure instead, Hulk/Null figure instead, and with that battle Venom so far being basically Carnage, I think it would be amazing to have Venom's Death Battle trilogy end on a matchup that finally taps into his anti-hero side, especially against such a thematically similar character. No idea what the music for this one will be, but I can safely say that Venom vs Kevin 11 really rocks. After meeting his doom at the hands of a fellow masked tyrant, then falling to another fallen hero who too abandoned his humanity, For the longest time, I was actually kinda torn on who Darth Vader's next opponent should be. My two picks are Saber Alter from Fate or Lich King for World of Warcraft. With Saber, it's a battle between chosen ones, who are powerful since birth, trained by smart-ass mentors, seen as some of the best warriors of their time, who then became empty shells of their former selves after nearly dying, got turned into a tool for a man they soon learned to hate, fought a member of their own order that once looked up to them, then were helped in their redemption by a hero who never gave up on them as they feel comfort in their last moments. There is a contrast in the fact that Anakin's downfall was due to him caring too much, breaking all rules regardless of personal consequence, whereas Artoria didn't care enough, only doing what she was quote supposed to do, at the cost of her own personal life, being labeled as an emotional monster in return. Don't get me wrong, this is an interesting matchup, and with Fate cosmology you would need to accept Vader's slightly more ridiculous higher hands, but I've also heard this connection list I just read kinda mixing and mashing together separate versions of Saber into one, instead of a straightforward one-to-one parallel like with Orbitor, and that's a matchup I still deem the absolute best for both, with a record amount of shared connections and themes. With Lich King, however, the connections also tap into the whole fallen hero aspect, but then again that's a vital component for Vader's character, so like, duh. In retrospect, it makes Doctor Doom an even weirder matchup by comparison, but I digress. Both started out as ordinary boys who lived relatively normal lives before being introduced to a powerful peacekeeping order of knights, who channel spiritual energy to fight their dark counterparts. They went on to become one of the most gifted and talented warriors of their time, training under mentors they developed a broader relationship with, but were also seen as brash and impulsive, and what they do ultimately succumb to the behind-the-scenes schemes of a Dark Lord, falling into the darkness and becoming one with a terrifying suit of armor that they now wear as conquerors. The contrast is that Vader died a redeemed man, kinda, whereas Arthas was far too gone, dying as the monster he became. Bonus point, neither of them is the main villain of the franchise, but they're easily the most iconic. Yeah, as I'm writing this script, I honestly think Lich King takes the best aspects of Obi Vader and Darth Saber and fuses them into a pretty great matchup for both. Unlike those two matchups, however, it's particularly interesting how Lich King was somehow even more far gone than freaking Darth Vader, and I can picture Anakin seeing a dark parallel of himself in Arthas, and you know I live for that character stuff. Character work shit. It's why I praise Obi Vader so much. For the fight itself, number one, Darth Vader in the snow. That's an immediate win in the visuals department, no matter in which medium it happens. Secondly, just imagine the Death Star looming over the ice-crowned citadel, the ghouls fighting the stormtroopers, the Scourge ghouls fighting the stormtroopers, all the while the Lich King peers down below in his cold throne. Then Vader shows up, says something like, "Your magic is insignificant next to the dark side," prompting Lich King to taunt Vader and his army as the battle officially starts. Just imagine their glowy red and blue swords clashing as Frostborn clashes against the blood-red lightsaber. As the blue Frostborn clashes against the blood-red lightsaber with speed and ferocity. Vader pushing Lich King away with the Force, the latter summoning ghouls for Vader to fight, you could say surrounded by dead men. And apparently Lich King also has a flying horse he can ride called Invincible, so imagine Vader pulling them both back on the ground as they try to flee with Force push, with the Force, or even a small fight in the air as Anakin aura farms on top of a TIE fighter. They can even invade each other's minds as we see glimpses of their previous heroic selves, pull each other's souls, or even Lich King winning by freaking turning Vader into one of his ice servants, giving him a frosty makeover as the saber turns icy blue. So much potential is kinda crazy. apparently the way they portrayed Lich King in his fight against Sauron was more so about his video game self, a tall, imposing, lumbering video game boss, not much his lore self. The far more tragic and nuanced situation, which Vader plays off of much more. And apparently Lich King already got new stuff since Sauron King. Still no clue who wins, apparently it's pretty damn close in terms of stats and X, with them having plenty insta-kill options, again like Obi Vader, so the win would have to fall on who's faster by that battle usual logic. Which in this case it would be Vader, and not gonna lie, ending his run on the show with his first ever W would be pretty damn sweet. After fighting a fellow magic user to see whose magic is Tara stronger, then a fellow bird lady in a desperate need of therapy, I think Raven's next best matchup is… I actually don't know. Maybe Marceline from Adventure Time? They both have childhood got GF vibes, lots and lots of superpowers, strained relationship with a dad that's basically Satan, and they were both on multiverses. Maybe you could use the Teen Titans Raven to make it less of a stomp. I've also seen people bring up Marvel's Magic or Sailor Saturn, but I have zero knowledge on the latter, and while the former is undoubtedly more popular now thanks to Marvel rivals, I'm not sure about the fight dynamic, how to sell it to mainstream audiences unaware of Magic's own demonic backstories, so yeah. After leading his team against another group of animal-themed robots turned mech and fighting solo against a fellow leader of a teenage superhero team, I think the best matchup for Red Ranger Jason Lee is Ruby Rose from RWBY. They're both red team leaders of colorful groups selected by wise mentors to defeat an ancient witch and her army of identical monsters. They also both carry a transforming weapon, a form of teleportation, and a unique ability that can be accessed only after being provoked by their enemies. Believe it or not, they also both had a crossover with the Justice League. As far as franchise combinations go, Power Rangers and RWBY seems very natural, I wanna say. Hunters, Rangers, multicolored team that acts like a family, mixture of sci-fi and fantasy stuff, though ironically RWBY is more sci-fi than the futuristic looking robot pilot. And I feel like he taps into Jason as a character after his previous episodes explored the teamwork with his allies and 20th century nostalgia respectively. The visuals could be really neat by combining the artistry of RWBY and the comic book feel of Power Rangers. And the music can only be a banger. The dynamic of Jason mentoring RWBY during the fight, him using 19 slang, while RWBY geeks out at his various flashy transformations and summons, I feel like this matchup packs a lot of potential to be pretty damn good, if not great. After psycho crushing and soul snatching his way to two Street Fighter bosses, I think Shao Kahn's next best opponent to wrap up his Dead Battle trilogy is still within the realm of fighting games, but I do have a more killer candidate in mind. One that really has the instinct, you might say, to face Shao Kahn in Mortal Kombat. This really was a Jujutsu Kaisen. Gargos from Killer Instinct. Why yes, Drunk Giraffe, who I totally know was watching this video. I did see your video on this matchup and I am surprised it hasn't happened yet. It's basically a battle between demonic looking dimensional conquerors from fighting games who love to manipulate people, play with the forces of life and death, traumatize monks, and gaining power by killing higher beings. The potential for aura farming is off the charts, thanks to these guys' designs. But what truly sold me on this matchup is how you get to capitalize on Shao Kahn's pool of magic powers, rather than his brute strength alone. Attacking stuff like stealing souls, fireballs, energy stuff, telekinesis, blood magic, portal creation. Apparently this Gargos fella has a lot to that too, on top of flying, which creates this really fun charging bull versus flying dragon dynamic that I think could be really cool. And it would force Shao Khan to actually tap into his intelligence, you know, like his old self, as cool as he sounds and looks in Mortal Kombat 11. Yeah, this matchup kinda speaks for itself, you know. It could be one try to conquer the other's realm, maybe a small army fight in between, and in general this old fight could carry a similar energy to Game Over, the track I mean, you know. Two emperors fighting for blood, but what could be really raw, and that could be really raw, man. I truly think this matchup is the best representation of Shao as a character, rather than just a video game final boss that does stuff with souls like his previous 2 episodes. Plus hey, the second Mortal Kombat movie is coming out and they could use that as an excuse to capitalize on Shao goodness. And if Dead Battle team doesn't do that, it's official, they suck. Okay, I really don't think that, but it's so weird that the Shao doesn't say this once in any of his fights, like what are we doing? Thanks for watching this video. I'm now gonna resume working on my Mahito vs Shigaraki review so that I can post it the same weekend as Doomslayer vs Master Chief. Drink lots of water, I'll do the same. Oko Krypton, hoping I made your day slightly better.